Hi, everyone. My name's Anshul. I'm the founder of June15 Consulting, and I have with me Geoff Bruskin. He is the managing partner of White Tiger Connections, and he is a very well-known expert in the M&A space for the accounting industry. But his skills and achievements go far beyond M&A. He advises firms on recruitment, on strategy development, and he's coming off of a big win. They just closed a $6 million deal. So, Geoff, thank you for being here and congratulations on the deal.
Thank you very much, Anshul. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, first, I always like to ask, like, tell us a bit more about your background and how did you end up doing M&A and why for the accounting space?
Sure. So, my background is executive recruitment for technology companies. I did that for 3 years out of college, venture capital backed tech companies. We did C-level placements for their portfolios. And I went into middle market recruiting there following and opened my own recruiting firm about 5 years ago. So, that was 2019. And almost immediately upon opening, I was introduced to PricewaterhouseCoopers transaction advisory services partner who was doing consulting for the executive committees of $100 million New York based accounting firms. And so he needed someone to do partner level recruiting for his clients. So he brought me in to do that. And I learned the accounting profession under his tutelage. So I've really only been steeped in the accounting world for about 5 years now. And the other half of what he did, in addition to recruiting for these large accounting firms, was he was their buy side representation for mergers and acquisitions.
Okay.
So he leveraged me and my recruiting background to help him source deals. So I sourced between $1 and $20 million accounting firms for these larger $100 million firms to purchase, and got to see the full spectrum of how an M&A process works, starting with initial conversations between prospects, signing of mutual non-disclosure agreements, light diligence, and kind of the framing of the integration strategy and what that would look like, LOI, negotiation of financials, legal diligence, drafting of buy-sell agreement, all the way through to signing, and then integration into the firms. So I had kind of a non-traditional introduction into M&A, not an investment banking sort of background
Mhm.
or pure brokerage. It was M&A in the context of consulting to not only get sellers a kind of nice situation, but to see that situation consummate as the acquisition was taking place and remaining involved with that. So I worked with my mentor for about 2 years. And then 3 years or so ago, he fully retired. And I decided there was so much opportunity in the profession to just kind of go all in with accounting, which has paid off very nicely for us. You mentioned we just had a nice win with a $6 million enterprise value deal. And we have a tremendous pipeline of projects. We work with boutique firms. We work with retail tax practices. Most of our clients are between 100,000 and 15 million in gross revenue, all public accounting firms. And as you said, we do recruiting, which is now the minority of our business. About 70% of our practice today is M&A.
Awesome. This is such a hot space right now because there's so many changes happening in the accounting space, and a lot of it is because of M&A. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the name White Tiger Connections.
Sure.
'Cause ever since we first met, it's been like I've been wondering like why that name. So I grew up in India, so I know white tigers mean something special. So tell me more, like how did that name come to be?
So white tigers, it's funny. I've always liked the animal. I also have a martial arts background, and the martial arts from around the world. There's a lot of mysticism in animals. I like the name. It's unique in a profession where everyone's last name is the name of the company. I wanted to do something that was memorable and that we could brand well. And as you say, that white tiger is it's a symbol of, I think, peace. It's a carnivorous animal that's a symbol of peace. So that's kind of a cool equation.
That's amazing. So I've only seen one white tiger in real life, but it was quite.
Good for you. That's I've seen zero.
Oh, we need to go to India. I know there's one in India, or at least one in India, but it was quite a sight, right? It just seems unusual that it shouldn't be that because most tigers are what, yellow brown. So
Right, right.
So great. So first question, I want to understand like there's just so much happening with the M&A in the M&A space in accounting industry. So tell us more about like what trends are you seeing? Like what's happening?
So I think the biggest trend that everyone is talking about is private equity's emergence into M&A here in the United States. It's happening globally as well. I just do some work in Australia and in the UK, and there are similar trends. Um, I think so. That's the largest one. What's so interesting to PE and to non-accounting firm buyers of accounting firms. I would say two things. One, just professional services in general is a pretty stable investment when it comes to bear market or uncertain economies because the clients are sticky. Professional services is kind of an anchor support aspect of the economy, whether you're talking about IT or accounting, finance, or marketing. Their services in general are reliable investments as opposed to more risky venture-based ones. So that's the first thing. The other just fantastic thing about accounting is that an accountant is so nuclear to the life of his or her clients. So high net worth individuals, closely held entities. I even see, what I fondly call retail tax practices that are doing, $250 price point 1040s. I have a practice in New Jersey right now. It's about 2 million in revenue, does 10,000 tax returns a year. The practice like that, you have a flywheel of services which can be created around it, such as health insurance, wealth management, real estate, if the practice is geographically centralized. So this we talk about trends, PE's emergence, and the reason for PE's emergence and kind of the evolution of the profession, I think has a lot to do with using accounting and that very core service, which is provided as a platform to create a plethora of services to that captive audience, which needs their taxes done on an annual basis. And the same is true from a business and entity standpoint, right? The accounting function, the bookkeeping function, to anyone who actually knows enough to know that bookkeeping is important, and CFO services, you now have access into that client's, that business's life, their ROI, their cost centers, their profit centers, and their decision making, and you can advise them accordingly. You're kind of the optimally positioned management consulting if you have that sort of peripheral vision as an accountant. So I think a lot of what PE is interested is this, this sort of front office, intelligent, more modernized and aware accountant that sees their nuclear position inside of their practice, as opposed to the more passive, it's the difference between being reactive and active in the way that your practice is run. I don't see many PE firms that are interested in, what is probably 70 or 80% of the profession, which is, just accountants who are almost accidental business owners who have accumulated books of business, either in a subject matter expertise or, broadly across many disciplines. But the CPAs or the non-CPAs that are innovative and running practices effectively, all the way down to less than $1 million in top line revenue, there are PE firms that are very interested in that. And then just one more trend quickly is wealth management. I see wealth management entering the accounting space very meaningfully. I think the strongest ancillary service, in addition to accounting itself being added, into the fray to serve those clients, is wealth management. And wealth managers know this, that the strong, other than acquiring other books of assets, the fastest and most meaningful way that they can scale their practice is through acquiring, either institutionally partnering with accounting firms, which is very hard to do, or acquiring them. So there's a lot of wealth management appetite in the space.
Yeah, that makes sense. My thought on that is PE also goes after industries that are traditional, that should be innovating, should be adapting, but aren't quite doing that. And I
Absolutely.
feel a lot of accounting firms, like you said, fall into that category, right? They're not changing fast enough. They're not adapting technology with they're not keeping pace with what's happening in technology. And in general, I feel there's a lot of stale business models out there, which PE likes. So um,
They do. The hard part is talent, right? Because you can take a stale business model. I have practices that are, you can take a practice that's running on a 10 or 15% margin and leveraging the outsource capabilities that you have, Anshul, an intelligent PE firm or a buyer of any class can take that firm and turn it into a 50-60% margin business. I don't want to say easy, because client optics matters and workflow
Yeah.
matters and technology matters, but it's not hard either. The hard part is the US based front office advisor accountant,
Yep.
because the talent is so limited. So that's where not to sell myself, but the recruiting piece of the puzzle, to be able to put those pivotal roles in place that cannot be shipped overseas or even to a low cost center, domestically anywhere, right? You have to have the advisor to the client. Overseas, AI, there's no replacement for the competent front office accountant. And that's where I see a lot of PE firms kind of scratching their head and knowing that there's something that's so tremendous that's here, but the trepidation and the hesitancy to actually play ball in the space has a lot to do with that, the talent.
I completely agree. I mean, talent shortages, that's been a big driving factor in the accounting space for a lot of things. So, do you think it's because of talent shortages that a lot of PE firms are coming in? Like, I'm trying to understand these talent shortages. Like, how are they impacting the M&A space? So, one, you said it's attracting PE, but like, what's happening with? Is it impacting valuations? Like, is it prompting a particular type of seller to come forward? Like, tell me more about that.
I think the talent shortage is creating more latency, more just slowness, stuckness in the profession. Everyone knows there's ridiculous opportunity. Like, you look at the parallel spaces of insurance and wealth management on the M&A side. Those industries are now relatively mature. In the last 10 years, there's been a tremendous amount of activity in those spaces, optimizing in both cases. They were largely paper practices, especially insurance was really bad. Non-digital workflow systems weren't really intact. Insurance as well has some talent issues, not as severe as accounting. Wealth management tends to have more availability of talent. But both of those industries have reached relative maturity, and PE has jumped on that, I think, largely because it was easier to solve for, because there was more talent. The same, the truth is that accounting is, as a profession, from a workflow standpoint, from even a technical standpoint, whether it's audit, tax, or accounting, any of those services, it's not fundamentally different than insurance or wealth management. If you're looking at it from a 10,000-foot view, the difference is talent. So everyone's interested in the space. Everybody knows that it's tremendously opportunistic, but solving for that talent piece is very challenging. I think that I talked to a $14 million firm for the first time. They're a new client of mine 3 days ago, and they had no low cost center. Right. So that's something that I think, meaning an overseas capability. I think that any firm, whether it's a top 10 firm or whether it's a $200,000 firm that doesn't have a low cost center, is missing out, because of the clients don't need to know, right? If it's tax, the client has to sign a 7216, which enables a third party to be able to work on and view material. The client doesn't need to know my work is going to India, right?
Mhm.
So purely from, and I don't feel that that's dishonest, because look at the availability of talent that exists. And by the way, look at what's happening if you lose that client, right? If you lose that client because you don't have the capacity to support them, they're going to get scooped up by H&R Block and TurboTax that have tremendous overseas cost centers anyway. So anyway, it's slightly separate. That's not a talent issue. That's a mindset issue, and a mindset opportunity. On the other end of the spectrum, the real challenge is that front office talent. So the firms that I'm seeing be highly successful have recruiting capabilities. They have dedicated recruiting capabilities. Because absent of that, it's very, very hard to do a roll up in the space, because 95% of the firms that are on the market have holes in their staff, certainly have holes in their partner group.
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched on something, we were talking about offshore teams. there's an observation that I made. Now, you know the space better than me. All bigger accounting firms that are buying smaller firms or private equity groups that are making investments, all of these firms like Citrin Cooperman, Cherry Becker, Ascend, they all have an offshore team and an offshore team with direct and full ownership. So I think there's something to that. Have you seen this yourself, or because I'm biased, right? When I see that, I'm like, oh, good talking point for me. But like, I feel like every time somebody talks about a deal and I see who bought it, and I see, oh, they have an office in India. So I don't know if you've seen that.
I think the I think the top 100 space is I'm going to probably 93% of them have an offshore team, a low cost center. They you know, it's a no brainer, and just to be clear, it's a no brainer because the talent isn't here. The talent that is here at the staff, the senior, the supervisor, even the manager level largely is overpaid and underperforms. Um, and the talent in India, for example, which is my preferred country, so Anshul, we didn't set this up. That's truly
Yeah.
I think the spirit of India is, I think, very much like the spirit of what the U.S. was after World War II. It's capitalist in a positive way. I think the caste system even promotes that, because working for as we've discussed in the past, working for a U.S. company is even more attractive than working for a company that works for a U.S. company. So there are so many layers to reasons why India is just a blossoming economy, and the labor force is so committed and dedicated and intelligent. So I think a lot of the top 100 firms, right, they may not have the sort of soulfulness that I have about it, but they have they're financially motivated, and it's clear, and they also are realists when it comes to the availability of talent. So I think it's mostly now mature in the top 100 space, but then you look at the rest of the profession, and my gut is that at least 40, if not 50% of the profession has yet to, maybe more, it could be 60 or 70%, has yet to leverage a back office, some kind of low cost center that is non-US based. And it's critical because you see the cost of living in the United States in 2024, even in rural geographies, is skyrocketing. So I think the opportunity exists, I think, really in the lower middle market. The $1 to $15 million space, is a great space to live. There are, I think, many $20 to $50 million firms that have not taken that leap yet. That's a hard nut to crack because many of them are non-metro, more rural or deep suburban geographies that may have more conservative values. There's a lot of the profession outside of the metro areas that have that. So it can be harder to get in the door, but obviously get in the door with a company like that if you're a back office provider, and those can be very large relationships.
So you touched on so many things. I'm going to go through them step by step. So first you talked about India. So I'm going to steal something that you said. The analogy that you said, right? That India is now where the US was after World War II. That is such a great way to describe what's happening in the country, right? It's moving towards capitalism. But more than that, culturally, like, when people look at India, we see, all right, people who look different, eat different stuff, different religion, all of that. But fundamentally, the US and Indian culture are similar because the importance of work that we have in our lives, right? That's the same. Here in the US, we're proud of what we do. We arrange our lives around work. Maybe that needs to change a bit, but that happens, right?
Right, it's a reality.
Yeah, that is a reality, right? And like, US is the most productive country. Right? So all of those things come because we're so committed. And I see the same thing in India, right? People are super motivated about what to do. Uh, all those stereotypes, right? I mean, you're in the US, you've heard those stereotypes. Indians need to become lawyers or doctors. Accountants is added to that too. So I see that zeal, I see that energy in India that I don't necessarily see here, like in North America anymore. And that is one of the big reasons companies are going and succeeding in India when they
Here's
find
the
talent.
difference, right? The difference is that the zeal does exist in the U.S., but in the individuals with whom the zeal exists within are the entrepreneurs and the future leaders. It does not exist in in the associates or the managers. It exists only in the partners and the leaders, and in many cases, not even in the partners, just in the executives. In India, it
I
exists
agree.
in all
Everywhere.
well, yeah, right, correct.
Everyone is hustling. Everyone from your entry-level staff to the shareholder. Everybody wants more, but everybody wants to work more to get more, and it's just fascinating. So on your next trip to India, have you been to India yet?
Not yet, not yet.
Oh, I need to take you. You're gonna see that when you meet people, and that'll be amazing.
I
And
drink Kool-Aid, Anshul. I really drink it.
I know. So you also talked a bit about mindset, right? So there is a stigma. There is a stigma attached to offshoring, and a lot of it stems from our early experiences with call centers in early 2000s, right? That unfortunately has stayed. People feel that, all right, I mean, I remember, I'm Indian, but I remember those calls. Like, they'd be frustrating. And so how do we get rid, like, we can't get rid, like, but how do we deal with that stigma and convincing accounting firms that it's actually a good option, like, for them to go to India or like a talent-rich country, leverage a team there? And I don't know if you have thoughts on
I do have thoughts, and they're kind of ugly.
that. Bring it on.
But so I think that I think Indian firms and need U.S. advocates, and I think that I think that it's actually in the best interest of the U.S. firm. I mean, the Indian firm is
Yeah.
only, you're doing us a favor because we don't know what we don't know, and that jadedness that we have is hurting us. So, I think that with the right U.S. evangelist, um, because it's all about trust, right? If you think about where the opportunity that has not yet been, uh, unpacked exists, it exists, in the most stereotypically, conservative, non-open-minded Americans, and I say that completely non-politically. It could be either side of the political spectrum, um, but if you develop the trust with the person who you're if and in order to develop that trust, there has to be a likeness, right? Trust is rooted in some sort of commonality. So you are, if you're Indian, whether even you, Anshul, you've lived in the US for 20 years, so right, 20, 24, something like that.
25, yeah.
25 years, even you're gonna, if it's 1 to 100 on a difficulty level, 1 being super easy, 100 being super hard, somebody calling from Bangalore, you're going to be at like 97. Even if you have great English, you're going to be at 97 as soon as they find out that you are calling from Bangalore, right? Or on video
Yep.
from Bangalore. If you're probably in like the 45 to 50 realm. Me or my peers, other influencers who are in the space here, for us, it's like a 5. And the reason is because we're already in the space, we're already on the phone, or video or meeting or conferences with accounting firms or whatever profession you like. And once we've built that credibility about the subject matter expertise that we're talking about, whatever that is, it becomes that much easier because the guard has dropped for us to open it as a possibility. So that's the strongest recommendation I can make.
And that is spot on, right? My first client in this space, they hired me because this guy, he knew me for like 10 years. And so I didn't have to do the trust building thing. It had already happened over 10 years. And I I get a lot of outreach from outsourcing firms in India that how do we crack this market? And so this is the video I'm going to send them, that hey, take a
Thank,
look at this.
thank you.
And I completely agree. I mean, you have to build relationships here. And one thing that I saw was there's two models of working in India, right? You work with a third party, you outsource tasks to them or like hire dedicated teams through them, or you have the direct ownership thing. What I've seen is when you're going directly, right? And that's sort of what I do. So when you go directly, right, the stigma is less because
Yep.
the stigma arises a bit from prejudice, but also from concerns like data security. But when clients know that it's their people, data isn't going to a third party, it's always going to be in the US, that helps a bit. Clients sometimes are also worried, I like India or like Philippines, or I like these talent rich countries, but what will my clients say? And that's another thing. And there's no hard and fast rule on how to address that. But what we've seen is that fear is more mainly in our head, because if clients leave you and, as you said, go to like a bigger company, right? They don't even have an option. All of their work is getting done in
It's
India.
a negligible, when it's done correctly, it's a negligible concern. A secure environment over there and a secure environment here in the US is a
Mhm.
secure environment. I mean, I'm not saying it's a zero concern, but I think on a, again, we're talking a certainly single digit percentages, if not a fraction of
Yeah,
1%, when it is in a secure environment. I think, I agree with what you said about about security, privacy, even optics is in there. Um, what I would say to that is, I think, like, I see it's a spectrum of reasons, and maybe the best way to describe it is like an axis, right? Because there's the emotional side that you need to penetrate as a a sales individual, and then there's the practical horizon as well. And the practical horizon reasons can be security, data integrity, latency, timeliness, time zone, right, workflow, um, the education level. There's infinite number of practical reasons. And I think, again, if you have that trust, it's easier, faster to get to the root of the question. Once you open, I have found, once I open the mind of someone to working with a firm in India, um, it's not about if anymore, it's when, and which, right? So as
yeah,
soon as that mindset is opened, um, they want to talk to two or three or four firms, maybe, or if they really trust me, they go to my preferred provider. And I do have a small company that I work with, which is my preferred provider. I've had a phenomenal experience with them so far. Not to say that I'm not open to working with others, but I think, so the emotional piece is more important, because once that wall comes down, um, it's a very easy sort of sales process. It's a discovery process, and then it's experiential, right? How white glove um, is the solutions architecture phase of the conversation, and then it's implementation, right? Then you're golden.
yeah. And I completely agree. 80% of my sales process is just on the emotional side, just building that relationship. And that's the part that takes time. Once that's done, it's a question of, all right, we're going to do something now, but what are we going to do? Let's talk about that. Um, there's one more thing you mentioned, right? You talked about um, transparency a bit, that firms, it's up to the firm owners that they don't have to necessarily, outside of tax, they don't have to necessarily share that the work is being done in India. I have a different view on that. So what I've seen is a lot of firms that are doing well in India, they are extremely transparent. And so, but it's a campaign. So what they have seen, so for example, Armanino, top 20 firm, they just opened an office in India. And what they are doing is, I love that. Their senior executives are posting from their LinkedIn accounts and announcing that, hey, now we have an India office. They're highlighting the direct ownership part, that it's our office. So they're posting pictures of their team there. They're posting pictures of like the opening, the inauguration, and slowly but surely, I'm seeing like more and more posts come about that from a lot of Armanino's top executives. So I think that is what a lot of firms are doing, and that is helping their clients feel more at ease. That all right, this is Armanino still in India, and they're being very open that okay, what is being done in India, why it's being done in India, and the key here is to talk from a position of strength. So my client, that was one of the biggest advice I gave them, that talk from a position of strength. You're not going to India because you're trying to save money. You're going there because the talent is there. And even if the talent paid the same, right? Or maybe a little less. You would have still gone there because there's just not enough accountants here. So I
The
think
cost,
that's
the cost is a bonus.
it's a bonus. Yeah, it just helps take that risk. So I think that's what accounting firms are doing. That are, and they're the ones getting most out of India. Um, just my 2 cents.
I don't disagree with anything that you've said. I think from an opportunity standpoint, you talk about Aprio, or any of these large firms, I think, the one clarification that, in my opinion, their motivations and intentions are different. The clients of the top 100,
Absolutely.
they all know. Everybody knows. Everybody, they know what's happening in the profession. If you're paying 10, 20, $50,000 to your accountant a year, 100, you probably are high enough in business that you're reading about what's happening in the industries. So what's happening, but if we're talking about a $20 million firm that works with construction companies between 2 and 20 million in rural Montana, they may not be up to date on what's happening in the profession, and they have not yet leveraged. So we think about where the opportunity still exists. I think that I don't disagree with anything that you said. It's just you need to know your audience, and
I agree.
that
I
it's
agree.
purely tactical.
And yeah, and based on the industry of the clients of the CPA firm, that's going to make a difference because some industries are more exposed to a global way of working, and
Exactly.
some aren't. So
Exactly.
that definitely will impact how you sell them or what value they derive from it. So I think we've gone through almost everything I want to talk about.
It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
Oh, so have I. It's always so much fun talking to you. I'm just going through my list of questions.
Too much.
So, um, is there something that I didn't ask you about M&A that I should have asked? Like, if somebody was looking to sell, or like, what should they know? Like, how do they get started?
So, I
Too
think
broad?
it's a great question. So much to say. I think what I want to say is that I see probably three different kinds of sellers. I see sellers who are looking to, as quickly as possible, monetize on the goodwill that they have with their clients. It's about a rapid exit. I see accounting firms that are looking for, they want to secure their succession plan, but imminently they are looking to do some kind of a transition. The first category, as much cash up front as possible. How quickly can I hit the road? The second category, yeah, I care about cash up front, but I'm not ready to stop yet. So maybe I'll be an employee, maybe I'll help upsell. You can just bring me into a place where I'm just selling business and serving clients, because you, Mr. Buyer, are going to take responsibility for the administrative aspects. You're going to create the low cost center that I haven't had the appetite to do. You're going to hire the staff holes that are here in the US underneath me. That's that middle category. And then you have all the way on the other side of the spectrum, which is the only reason I'm exploring or open to an acquisition or merger is because I can take my $3.5 million company where I'm doing very well. I'm cash flowing 2.2 million a year. And if I keep hitting it really hard for the next 5 to 10 years, I might hit 8 million with a $5 million profitability. But if I do this inside of an environment where I can go from being an owner to being an executive, now I can create $100 million program because I know how to do this very well. So those are the three, right? It's really those three options. And we work with all of them. And all of them exist in droves right now. I mean, it's a very good market to be in my seat. And I feel very blessed because there's so much supply and there's so little education. Like there are a lot of brokers out there. There are not a lot of advisors. And I perform a brokerage function, but we're much more motivated by what's driving the seller and creating, like you do, a solution that's curated to their needs. And we work with and are building an increasingly large network in the cream of the crop from a buyer standpoint, who have the innovativeness and the resourcefulness to solution any three of those situations.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's all I have, Geoff. Thank you so much for being here, talking to us, sharing your insights. I loved our conversations, like always. A lot of good insights. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Anshul. Pleasure.